webinar, International Student Remote Learning Support. And my name is Dr. Vivi Hua. I am your host today. It's my honor. And I am a licensed psychologist based in New York. I'm also an international student success coach. Joining me today is our co-host, Dr. Sunny Ho. Dr. Sunny Ho will be supporting us and facilitate the webinar as well as the discussions. So as we know that it's been a very, very rough year for international students over this past year. With the pandemic, with COVID, and there has been a lot of uncertainties that international students have to deal with. Coming with that is remote learning and a lot of travel uncertainties, travel bans, and on top of that, there's also unclear US government policies that international students have had to contend with. And so while some of the topics may not necessarily be within the scope of our discussion today, but what we can do is to focus on this is another year of remote learning. What can we do altogether to support our international students community? And I know that we also have a lot of school professionals joining us, such as international student advisors. And a lot of our school professionals would also like to learn about how to better support our international students this coming semester. So Sunny Ho, Dr. Ho, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you, Vivi. My name is Dr. Sunny Ho, and I work as a staff psychologist at CN Hall University in South Orange, New Jersey. So so happy, so excited to see every one of you kind of coming into this space. And feel free, like I will be monitoring the chat room. So feel free to kind of type in any questions, like in the meantime, I mean, like during the session, that if you actually have any questions related to what the panelists have shared or anything that you would like to kind of share with the with other participants, like feel free to kind of pop in the chat room. I will be monitoring, and we have spare kind of 15 minutes for Q&A toward the end of the session, so we can actually help address some of the concerns that you have, okay? So, and this kind of event is actually jointly organized by AAPA and also Division 17 APA International Section, Counseling Psychology. So I am kind of happy to kind of like want to have Dr. Nelly Tran to kind of introduce AAPA a little bit, and also like kind of so glad to have you join us this afternoon. Thank you, Nelly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ho and Dr. Hua. This is, we're so excited to be able to facilitate and support this event. Thank you so much to APA and Division 17. I am the Vice President of the Asian American Psych Association, and on behalf of our presidential trio and our executive committee, we are so thankful for Dr. Ho, also Dr. Minji Yang, who has been really supportive and keeping international students at the forefront of our thinking. I've learned so much from them, and I'm so grateful for the work and service that they've done, all while going through the same, global pandemic, anti-Asian, anti-international students kind of turmoil in the last year. So any way that we can support this work, we are so grateful. Thank you to our panelists today. I look forward to learning more from you all today as well. And look forward to hearing from anyone who might have thoughts on how we could better support and be with our international students and those who are supporting our international students. So thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you, Nelly, for your introduction. So just so everyone knows that because there are not all of the international students, and there are also school professionals who would like to have access to our webinar but not able to join us today. So we are recording this webinar. Okay, so before we actually get started with our first activity of today, I would like to invite our panel of experts to introduce themselves to us. Our panelists are experts who have several years of experience working with international students, and many of them used to be international students themselves, and they've been very passionate about supporting this community. So I would like to perhaps invite Dr. Shaznin.
Thank you, Dr. Wan, Dr. Ho. Hi, everyone. My name is Shazneen Darwala. I use she, her, and hers as my pronouns, and I am a licensed psychologist in the state of Oregon and work at Oregon State University's Counseling and Psychological Services. And I'm currently on an H-1B visa and was a former international graduate student from India. Will I pass it on to someone, Vivi, or? Okay, all right, great. How about you, Asmita?
Thank you, Dr. Shazneen. Hi, everyone. It's so glad that you all are here. I am currently studying at Auburn University. It's my first year as a counseling psych student. Yeah, I am an international student from India. So I'd like to pass it on to, Shreya.
Thanks, Asmita. Hi, everyone. My name is Shreya. I also use the she, her, hers pronouns. I am currently an international student, my first year of my PhD in clinical community psychology at DePaul. And I'm really happy to be here. I will pass it on to Carissa.
Thank you, Shreya. Hi, my name is Carissa Edwardani. I'm an associate professor at Azusa Pacific University. I'm also a licensed clinical psychologist in California and Virginia, but I live and work in Southern California, and I've been a faculty member for almost 10 years now, full-time faculty member. And before that, I was an international student for 9 years, undergraduate and graduate. And I will pass it on to Song.
Thank you, Carissa. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. I'm Dr. Chao Song. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist at the state of Connecticut. I'm currently working as a staff psychologist at University of Connecticut, Student Health and Wellness Mental Health Office. I came here first in 2013 as an international student. I'm glad to be here and, to provide some support to our, international students, as well as some probably input for some faculty members from the, universities. It's always like my passion to provide more support to this population. I think it's partially because, myself, I was an international student. So I do feel like really related and connect with this population. So thank you for having me here today. I will pass it to Gabrielle.
I think that would be, right, Sunny, that would be it for our panel discussion, right? So thank you so much, all the panelists, for your introduction. So before we get started with our actual panel discussion, I would like to invite all of you who are here today with us to do a mindfulness exercise. As you are going to find out in our panel discussion afterwards, mindfulness would be a very important and critical skills that I would like a lot of our international students, and because this is an important skill that would help them to cope with a lot of questions they actually have submitted during the registration, and to manage a big part of the remote learning stress. So if you would like, I would, you feel free to sit back and feel the support of your back, being supported by the back of the chair, and feel the support of your the ground underneath your feet. So just make yourself feel comfortable in your seat first. Okay. So I would like to invite you to first take a deep breath in. Take a deep breath in through the nose, and then take a deep breath out through the mouth. And just continue with the breathe in and breathe out. Deepen and slow down your breathing. So as you breathe in again, I would like you to focus on the strength and energy and the warmth, sunshine entering your body to refill yourself. And as you breathe out, just let off the stress, any thoughts, any anxiety or worry that may no longer serve you. And just continue with this breathe in and breathe out process. In through your nose and out through your mouth. And notice how you feel at this moment. Maybe something, a physical sensation inside of your body. It may be some sounds in your environment. Just take this moment to connect with yourself and connect with your environment. And continue with your breathing. As you breathe in and breathe out, your thought might get distracted, and that is okay. Part of mindfulness skill is for you to notice where your attention goes and gently bring back your attention and focus on what you want to focus on. So if you would like, I would like to invite you to gently open your eyes and just look around your surroundings. Look to your left, your right, up and down. Just focus on the details of your space. Things you see every day. Things you may forget to look at. Things you may be taking for granted. Things you may be starting to see in a different light when you are sitting in this space. So just take a couple of seconds, moments, to sit in this stillness, taking in your surroundings. And then note something you are grateful for quietly in your mind. And sit with that gratitude for a few seconds as you continue with the breathing for a few moments. And before we come back to join our today's discussion, just take a couple of more deep breaths, hoping that our discussion will be thoughtful, will be engaging, and that all of our participants will walk away with a lot of helpful, valuable information and a refreshed mindset for this coming semester. Okay. Okay. All right, I think that we are ready to start our panel discussion today. So our first question for our panelists would be when it comes to impact of remote learning. Based on your work or personal experience, I would like to ask our panelists, in what ways has remote learning impacted international students during the pandemic? And feel free, people in the audience, if you have any questions as our panel discussion goes on, then please put in your questions in the chat box, and Dr. Sunny Ho would be reminding us when we can take a pause and then answer your questions. So our first question is for our panelists, based on your work or personal experience, in what ways has remote learning impacted international students during the pandemic? Panelists, feel free to jump in.
Maybe I can get us started and then others can join me. Based on the work that I have done, as well as personal experience, a couple of things that came to mind is feelings of isolation, especially in this remote working environment. It can be really hard for specifically new international students to get a sense of connection with their peers. I facilitate a Women X of Color student support group at Oregon State University. And in our most recent group meeting, we had a couple of new international graduate students who were talking about starting their programs in the midst of a pandemic. And the only way that they have connected with their peers, with their faculty, is through a Zoom environment. And that can really sometimes enhance feelings of isolation. We know that international students, graduate as well as college students, are living away from family. And sometimes when they have maybe a TA-ship or an RA-ship, especially again for graduate students, it can be hard to work from their country of origin, because I know that some universities have removed stipends if you are, working from or studying from your country of origin. So some of the students in the group were talking about how they actually needed to stay in the US because their stipend is a source of income. And we know international students do not have access to federal dollars. And so in order to keep the income, they have to stay within the US, which means continuing to stay apart from their family and their loved ones, especially in a time of a global pandemic. And then the other piece we also talked about is low motivation and level of interest. And I think that probably cuts across international as well as domestic student population. However, again, for international students, it might play a particularly important role because we know that students are coming to the US for their academic coursework. And so when they notice that they are experiencing low motivation in academics, it can take an even greater mental health toll on them. So those are a few things that I have noticed, and I'm curious about my other panelists if they'd like to add anything.
Thank you, Shazin, for sharing your observations.
Shazmeen, I think a lot of what you're saying is something that I'm pretty sure Asmita also feels, because both of us are PhD students for the first time and we're like a COVID cohort. That's been particularly hard. I think many international students are actually moving for the first time to a new location. So there really is, it's what you said, a lot of isolation, but that's because we're in a new place. We're also disconnected from our family. The few of us who are with our family are probably not in the same time zone as our university. So there's a lot of issues with that. So yeah, overall, I think it's already isolating for everybody else, but I think it's particularly isolating being in this position.
I definitely agree with what both of you said. And moreover, it's, I guess, also with the isolation comes the bit of like, okay, is it safe to mingle with people, or if there's something happening in person? I think I'm always confused, like, is this safe or is this not safe? Like for example, India has, so if I was a part of Indian Association and they were organizing festivals on Zoom, but then it's just not the same feeling to attend festivals online. Like I wasn't feeling like the same vibe or the same kind of atmosphere. And when they started to happen in person, then I was asking the same question, like, is it safe for me to go out? So I think that mental struggle of being in person and being remote is what's still happening. And then it's all, as Shreya mentioned, it's heightened for international students, right? Because we are looking for ways to connect, but then we're also concerned about COVID. So just finding that balance has been, I think, some of a struggle for most of us.
I think that one of the things that happens often for international students, just in general, COVID or not, and I know I felt this way when I first came as an international student, is this issue of belongingness, this question of, do I belong here, do I not? I think these questions come up when we first enter the classroom and realize, or a Zoom classroom and realize, wow, the educational system here is really different than what I'm used to. The expectations are really different than what I'm used to. I know for me, was the realization that I'm expected to speak up a whole lot more than what I was used to. And also, with language, with being like aware of accent and things like that, it just brings up a lot of feelings of, do I belong here? And can I make it here? Can I be successful here? And I think that during COVID, that's compounded. That feeling is compounded because for students who are maybe logging in from other time zones, for example, I know in my institutions, we went through an emergency remote learning, and I think a lot of institutions did this as well. And there was not a lot of maybe thought or time to be put into thinking through, how do we accommodate all of the time zones? How do we do this in an inclusive way? How do we support international students? And I think that when I know when my students are logging in at 3 a.m. and at 11 p.m. and it's a struggle for them, and the institution is also struggling to figure out how to maintain the standard of academics, but also working with the students from various time zones, then it can compound this feeling again of, oh gosh, do I belong here? And I think that that can be such a powerful feeling that as professionals working with international students, it's important to remember just how powerful that feeling can be, that has such a big impact on educational performance and achievement, and also social connection as well.
Right, I agree with you. Also, Carissa and also other panelists have shared with us. I think international students as a whole, we come with some vulnerabilities in the U.S., and there is inevitably some thoughts and questions about do we belong to this country? Do we get accepted, right? And all of these sort of doubts and those questions can get compounded during this very challenging times during the pandemic atmosphere, and especially with remote learning, a lot of classes still happening. I think within the U.S. time zones, and some students may not able to necessarily travel to the U.S. and some of them might feel forgotten, right? Then logging in from very different time zones, perhaps those tuning in from Asia. And so I think just all around, I think that this has a very sort of encompassing kind of effect for our international student community. Yeah. Song, is there anything you would like to share with us before we move on to our next topic?
Yeah, I agree with all the other panelists shared. I think this this remote learning model, it's not just academic impact the students' academic life, it's also their social life, their personal life, and this got like impact how they view them as whether I belong to here or not. I do think our next few questions actually could be a good, I think, and not necessarily like a resolutions, but coping approaches to actually address all those concerns.
Okay, great. So a couple of weeks ago, I did a survey with the international students in my Facebook support group. And for a lot of these students, they said blur boundaries between school and personal life was voted as their biggest challenge with remote learning. So my question for our panelists today is, how can students what can students do to have more clear sense of these boundaries between personal and school life?
Actually, I would love to start address this if it's okay, because that's like a question that I constantly being asked by the students that I work with, both like international students and domestic students have been like facing these challenges. Like in the past, I woke up, I dress up, I go to school, and then I come back. So there's a kind of like a boundaries that, okay, this is the place, school is the place that I study, and then home is the place that I take a rest. But now, like, I take class from home. So I woke up, I can just grab my laptop and open it and have my class. There are definitely blurred boundaries, I think, between school life and personal life. One thing that me and my students, we were talking about, which is very helpful for a lot of them, is maintain their like a daily routine in a way that just like before COVID, before you start social isolation at home, what time do you normally get up? Do you normally like dress up? Yes, do the same. Even when you're at home, you don't need to go out. You still do the same thing, maintain the same schedule, the same time that you eat lunch, the same time you study. And another, I think, the situation that last time people encountered or the students encountered is, I feel like I was stuck in my own little room, because I know that in certain universities, students are required, they can live on campus, but they're kind of like restricted in their own door. So it's like a small space. Or if they're at home, they probably spend more time like in their own room to study and have fun, do all the things in the same space. Sometimes students would feel like, it's actually create another kind of like make the boundaries even more blur, because this is not the place I normally study, but now I'm studying here. Or this is not the place that I normally have fun, but now I don't have other choices. So some of the strategies that we've been talking about is to, if, your resources is limited, right? You only have this one room, this space that to study and to have your personal life. You can intentionally create a space. Like, yes, I only have this dorm room, but at this small corner, I have like a study desk there. So that's a corner that I'm gonna take my classes, do my schoolwork. And I have another space in my dorm that I could, enjoy my hobbies, listen to music, play instrument, and that is just for me to rest. So here are some like strategies that me and my students we've been talking about, and they have been like practicing, which they all reported it's kind of like helpful, at least gave them some sense of structure and boundary.
Thanks, Song. These are very helpful strategies that thank you for sharing with us. Is there any panelists that would like to chime in and to share some of the things that you have shared with your students that was helpful to them?
I think the other thing to possibly think about is using, as Song was talking about, physical boundaries. I also think about time boundaries. So you are using time, time slots. So from 9 to 5, I'm going to be in academic mode. I know sometimes it's easier said than done. However, maybe keeping time as your container can also similarly be helpful. And then another piece in, enlisting my students in implementing some of the strategies is giving some context. So knowing that in this pandemic, our usual, structured lives have really been broken down. What we used to do prior to the lockdown or prior to the pandemic is probably not useful right now or is not allowed right now for the health and safety of our community. And so recognizing that you need to impose a new structure, because that's what will be most helpful to our bodies and to our brains to live in maybe in some ways a routine, to have some predictability when this pandemic is rife with so much unpredictability. So giving a little bit of that context, I have found helps to get some buy-in from students who might be maybe feeling some of that low motivation, or who might just use the strategy and find that it's not really working. But getting the bigger picture, getting the context maybe allows for them to be creative. So that means that they might find their own way of imposing a structure and therefore getting maybe a normalcy to their life again.
Yeah, just coming off of. Oh, sorry, Asmita. Go ahead.
No, okay. So I just wanted to kind of continue what Shazneen said in terms of like just that each person is different and each person can like have their own way of like demarcating those boundaries. Like I started off with having that thing like, okay, I'll just not study in bed. Like I'll have a separate study space. I'll have those demarcation and boundaries, but like it didn't work for me, to be honest. Like I felt like I just wanted to be studying wherever I want. Like I would sit on the dinner table and then open my book and that would feel comfortable to me, or I would just go to a cafe and then that would feel okay. So I guess it's just different for everyone. And especially with the blurred boundaries, I guess I want to bring up the Zoom fatigue into picture and talk about that a bit, just because everything is being on Zoom, just not our classes, but just everything, every social meeting we have, every advising meeting or any kind of meeting just happening on Zoom. And it's just really kind of stressing, I think, all international students. And that's also a major reason, I guess, for the blurred boundaries, everything being virtual as opposed to some parts being in person, I guess.
Yeah, I wanted to dovetail off of what Shazneen said about the body, and that I think it's so important to pay attention to our bodies right now, especially right in the midst of all the tension that we're carrying. Some international students might also be managing childcare right now. And while trying to pay attention to classes, but also maybe having like screaming in the background and things like that, right? And how much that also impacts the body. And one thing that comes to mind with that is to exercise self-compassion, that to note what your body's feeling is, and also give yourself some compassion around that. And if you're feeling not as motivated right now, if you're feeling like you're struggling, just allow yourself to be in that space and to feel that tension, knowing just how much, right, just how much you're carrying, how much we're all carrying right now. And so I think that paying attention to those things and trying out different coping mechanisms and seeing what works and what doesn't work, you know, and oftentimes, right, I think right now with our body carrying so much tension, having some sort of physical activity, whether it be yoga or walking or stretching, might be helpful, but, you know, kind of to see if that works for you or not. But kind of like what Shazneen said also, that marking the time and maybe marking the beginning of your day with some sort of like walking or yoga or something like that. And then for me, I mark the end of my day when I brew some tea in the evening, right? And that's like, okay, that's when I start to relax and I don't do any more work. And I think that having kind of small boundaries like that is helpful, because our brains crave predictability. And right now we have a lot of uncertainties that we're dealing with. And so to have some routine where our brain can hold on to some sort of grounding in our schedule helps our body to function more optimally.
I think going off of everything that you guys were mentioning, another thing that's helped me, and this is depending on whether you like scheduling things and all of that, even scheduling time for rest, so that you know that that's time away from your laptop and that you're doing something that's for you, that's not related to school or work or anything like that.
Thanks for everybody's sharing. I think that it is a time of uncertainty, and I think our body doesn't move regularly as usual, where we used to have to walk to school or commute to school and then commute back home and to do different kind of sort of activities, grocery shopping and socializing with our friends, peers. So I think that what I think would be helpful is to identify, for students to identify what your essential activities are. So essential activities would be based on your own self-care, based on your self-knowledge. What are the activities you think would be so important for you to feel a sense of well-being, okay? So it can be physically, right? It can be physical exercise like Carissa and mentioned yoga and sort of meditation, or it can be workout exercise, right? You can just watch maybe a video online and to follow a certain program with that. And it can also be in terms of sleep, in terms of diet, in terms of food, and are you able to eat well, sleep well? All of these is part of sustaining our body and sustaining our mind and make sure we are connected with ourselves. And another part is sort of identify your sort of biological clock, right? And so everybody kind of works with a different kind of biological clock. Some people might be early birds, other students might be a night owl. So focus, perhaps schedule some of the important schoolwork and report projects during the time when you can focus the best, when you can be most productive. So work along with your biological clock rather than against it. I think in a way can be sort of a good way to help students to be as effective as possible. And just play around with it, right? Experiment with what works for you, what feels sustainable for you, and what need to be tweaked around. Okay, that's great. So our next question is, another impact is that students are finding it difficult to feel motivated with online learning, with their studies in general. Okay, and when they're in an online class, it's also easy for them to get distracted. Granted, because we don't interact in person in class, so there may be other things in our surroundings pile of paperwork and other things, right? And speaking of blur boundaries between school and personal life. So what would be some suggestions our panelists could share with us when it comes to sort of navigating this overall sense of kind of diminished motivation, and also some strategies that can help students to stay better focused when they tune into an online class?
I think, you know, what Teresa actually talked about earlier about like sometimes maybe it's okay, you know, to have certain days you don't feel that motivated. I'm in New England area. Sometimes we do have like winter storms, right? And maybe because of the weather, you already deal with lots of uncertainties, but there are certain days you're just feeling very, very like not motivated, and maybe it's okay. You know, this is the moment that we want some like self-compassion and, you know, validate yourself and normalize your feelings and say that, you know what, I had a bad day. Today I'm not probably being able to as motivated as I used to be, and realize that I'm dealing with my body and my mentally I'm dealing with lots of uncertainties. So for certain days I, you know, may feel like less motivated. I think on the other thing that I mentioned earlier is about like, you know, created this space. It's also sometimes helpful, like I think particularly with some of my students who live in the dorm room, they kind of like sleep there, they eat there, they do everything there. So have that, like we talk about, like if you set up like a study space, for that space, when you stay there, right, you try to you know, limited the things that would distract you. Probably put your cell phone away while you were doing the class, because you know, like probably from 9 to 10, you do have this class, and you know, and it's only something that related to this class or schedule. You know, you can you will put there. So physically reduce some of the source of distractions, and also we talk about like, you know. Sometimes it's nice to reward yourself, to celebrate. If today, you know, I've been doing well, I'm able to focus during this whole like online class, probably, I don't know, at the end of the day, I will like enjoy like some like ice cream or like chocolate, or buy myself a small like stuffed toy, stuffed animals. Those are also, you know, we also talk about like, sometimes, you know, we are doing this online classes, right? But if you do know your classmate, and there's a way that you can keep each other accountable. Like, you know, I noticed this class is really hard for me to focus, but if I once in a while I check in with my classmate during the classroom, like, you know, through the chat section or just through some other things, that could be helpful as well. You know, I think this is not just help us to kind of like improve the motivation a little bit, it also help us to feel these social connections with our classmate, because I don't think it's like only happened to few students. Majority of students I talk to, they do mention they feel like during the online class it's very hard to sustain their attention. They just got distracted very easily. So it's not just one or two students. I think lots of students have that issue. So if, you know, they can, through this technology, right, through the chat section, to kind of like just check in, hey, are you still there? Do you pay attention to this or to this part? That'd be a good way to help them as they stay focused. And also, you know, once they feel like, oh, you know what, I'm able to pay my attention to this class, I got what I need from this class, I think they feel more empowered, and this like process of self-empowerment could help them to get more motivation to some extent. Yeah, please feel free to add more. This just some thoughts.
So I think what I find helpful is nowadays I try to keep reasonable expectation, meaning that it is an unusual time for everybody around the world. It's really not just us, not just professionals, not just students. It's pretty much everybody in this world is impacted by this pandemic, by remote learning, and we're working remotely. Our body is not moving, right, not working right regularly as before, and our mind may not necessarily work as the same as before. So my suggestion is to sort of keep it a reasonable sort of amount of sort of expectation. Try not, if you are overachiever, right? If students are overachiever, try to sort of dial it down a little bit and make sure that we are, students are attending classes and we are doing our best we can under the very special circumstances. Otherwise, and I think as Song shared with us, right, when you do attend this online classes, try to make sure that your desk is free of distractions. Try to make sure perhaps your TV is turned off, your other windows are closed out, and perhaps mute your phone so that you don't get distracted by people who want to get in touch with you, right? And also what we were doing earlier when it comes to mindfulness exercise. I think this is something very valuable tool for students to take away with you all, is to practice mindfulness exercise on a more regular basis, so we can notice, oh, I'm actually getting distracted. It's okay, and let's just bring our attention back to the class that's in progress at this moment. And so part of the resources that we will be sharing with you all after the webinar in the coming days is that we're going to compile a list of mindfulness exercise, different kind of activities that you can do on your own, and to help you continue to cultivate this mindfulness skills. So we're going to move along. Sunny, do you want us to take this question or from the chat, or?
Yeah, I'm just trying to kind of like, I think Sarah actually brought up a really good question about like any tips, like when thinking about like, because of whatever is happening, like since like pandemic, there are a lot of law regulations change, like targeted toward particularly international population. So I'm just curious about like your professional perspective or a student's perspective, like what do you want to kind of hear from like maybe from advisor, like student perspective from advisor, or like as a professional, like how would you navigate that space to ensure their safety and also reassure their valuable asset to the community? Like what are some of the things that you would share in this space? Yeah.
I think we were all in a similar situation last year. And I know for me, the most important thing was absolute honesty from advisors as well, both advisors, international student advisors and clinical or any PhD faculty advisor. But at the same time, because so many of us just feel so unsafe, having someone tell us in different ways that they'll fight for you and be there with you, or that they understand your pain, is extremely helpful. Even though they were very honest in telling me that they didn't know how it was going to look, they always said that they would stand by me, and that made such a big difference.
Right, I think as Shia pointed out, I think that sense of companionship, right? I know that many of our participants in the audience today are school professionals, really want international students to do well and want to provide a lot of care for our international student community. But I think that sometimes I know that school professionals may not necessarily have any updates, right? May not necessarily even sometimes have good news to share with the students, right? And we ourselves may have that anxiety or may have that fear or worry that how am I gonna share the information I'm about to share with the students, granted if it's not necessarily something that will be welcomed, or sometimes I just don't have any update. I think that sense of companionship is something that we often overlook a lot of times. International student, actually the journey of them is a lot of times very lonely. It's very lonely, and a lot of students don't feel they are understood, don't feel that people around them understand what they are going through during this journey. But as a student advisor, my suggestion is, and as Shreya pointed out, is to let students know that you are there to work with them. And if you have any update, if you have any information, you would be the first to share with them. And just that reassurance would be very helpful to let them know that I'm not dealing with all of this by myself. My advisor, my school professional staff that I'm working with have my back, that they would keep me posted the first moment when they hear any news. And so sometimes even if you don't have any news or update to share with students, right, it's okay to send out an email to students to say, hey, just checking in. I know that you guys must be feeling anxious and wanting to have more updates from us. That just so you know, we unfortunately don't have any updates right now, but we are here to just support you. If let us know, schedule an sort of office hour or an appointment if you would like us to sort of address any questions you have. Okay, yeah. I hope that answers Sarah's question based on Shreya's response as well. Okay, great. So we are moving along. So the next question is about time difference. Okay, we've heard some really difficult stories of international students attending school from a very different time zone, and where the schedule is completely the opposite from the US. So how has time difference affected students' studying, participation in school activities, and overall well-being? Is there anything students can do to manage this? And what can schools or faculty do to support students in different time zones? Does anyone want to get started?
Yeah, I think it's definitely very it's a challenging situation that for me as a faculty, I wish we have figured it out better because I think that we're not quite there yet. So I think that one of the things that faculty can do to help with this is to make accommodations where lectures can be made available later on for students to watch at a different time. We definitely have a limitation of FERPA, where we can't record our classes where students' faces and names show up. But I've been able to figure it out where I can lecture on Zoom for a period of time, and I just record my lecture itself, and that so then the only part that's recorded is just my voice and my content. So again, of course, that means students are also missing out on the class discussions and things like that. But at least that's something. And so having some sort of asynchronous format where some things can be made available and be accessed asynchronously is helpful. Using discussion boards in addition to in-class discussions help students to be able to access that as well. But I think that more than anything else, flexibility and an awareness to be to be mindful of different realities is probably what's going to be most helpful in being able to be in a place where we can be creative on how to, again, support the international students and support them in accessing the class material as much as other students as well.
Thanks, Carissa, for sharing a little bit with us from the perspective of a faculty member. So I wonder, Carissa, if I may have a follow-up question for you. So I know that some international students, perhaps from different cultural background, some students may not necessarily have the practice or sort of habit of sort of advocating for themselves. So in that kind of situation, how would you suggest for students to sort of, if they notice they have any needs that perhaps may require some accommodations or flexibility from the faculty members or from maybe school professionals in general, is there anything you would recommend in terms of how students may be able to share their needs with their faculty members or the schools?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that what comes to mind is how students have done it in my classes, and so mostly I'm learning from them how they've done it, right? And I know, for example, at the beginning of class, I usually do a check-in on inviting students to share on chat box, just using a few words, share how you're doing today. And I think that can be an opportunity to just even plant a seed to be like, I'm struggling since it's 3 a.m. here, but happy to be in class, right? Happy to log in. So just kind of planting seeds that you're in a different time zone might even kind of just alert the faculty to then say, hey, how are things going for you? Are you doing okay with that? And again, with those check-ins, right? Sometimes students have said, I'm struggling with time management because a lot of things happen at midnight my time, right? But I'm, doing the best that I can. So I think there's a broad variety. If you don't feel as comfortable being maybe asserting your needs and asking for accommodations, maybe starting small in those steps and planting seeds and just sharing the realities for you.
Right, Carissa, I think that you point out something is at least that your professors know where you are tuning in from, right? And it may be regular work hours for the professor, but actually somewhere in a different corner of the world, there are students who are tuning in when it's actually late, right? Late past midnight as well, right? And so just that sort of your peers, American peers, and also faculty member know that of your existence, of your time zone. And I think that just to gain some visibility and let them know that you are from different parts of the world and you may have different needs that need to be addressed as well. Okay.
Yeah, I also think it needs to be addressed systematically as well, or systemically at the institutional level. And so that maybe another way to address it is to speak with your international student advisor or international student department to see if there's any advocacy that can be done at the institutional level across the board. So it doesn't just fall on you as a student to have to then advocate for your own needs.
Right. Many of our school professionals tuning in today, they really want to know how, as school professionals, how to advocate for the international student community together as a whole. And I think that's very good advice to feel free to reach out to your international student office and to let them know your needs and how together as a department, perhaps they can also advocate on your behalf as well. So the next topic is about social isolation. I think we've been touching upon this topic along the way as well. And so many students are, because of the remote learning, and there's a lot of feeling of isolation and disconnection from people around them. And they might see their peers online in class, but they don't really get to interact or hang out with them. Okay, so how do sort of students get affected, right? What is the impact of isolation when it comes to the well-being of international students? And what can school do, and school professionals or sort of international student advisors or international students together as a community, how can all of these sort of stakeholders sort of come together to foster a stronger sense of community and togetherness, belonging, and during this remote learning time?
I guess from a student perspective, I feel social isolation is real, and when it hits you hard. And I think something which has been really kind of helpful for me is reaching out to like my upper cohort members. And sometimes we think like we just have to reach out to them for like academic advice or something, you know, it has to do with the coursework or something. But what I have kind of realized is like you can also reach out to them as for social support, or like how were these times challenging for you when you were, you know, going through this phase, and talking to them about that, or just about how you're struggling basically, could also be really kind of, I think, cathartic. And with social isolation like happening because of COVID, I think you guys could have like a Zoom call with each other. I know Zoom is the only mode of communication mostly, but just having that hangout kind of call with them and just kind of discussing through your day, or like what kind of things you're doing, instead of talking just about, you know, studies all the time or just attending meetings, can sometimes be helpful. And I've realized that sometimes having like a coffee date with your mentor or like your advisor, you know, just discussing about things and going on in life apart from like academics, can also be helpful. So I guess that's just one way I've found how to cope.
Thanks for sharing your tips with us, Asmita.
Hi, I can share something that what I learned from my students, as well something that at our university, what we did is things we started like a international student support group. It's not like clinical group, it's more like outreach support group. It's open only to the international students, where like students can join, they can share, they can connect with each other. We have senior students connect with the like new students, and you know, they kind of like exchange the contact information and peer with each other, like become like a mentor-mentee relationship. We also have students just come in and share with each other about the concerns, the struggles they experienced. We don't necessarily have like resolutions, because, you know, like what we talked about earlier, there are lots of uncertainties, but knowing that, hey, there is like a international student group there that I belong to, and I'm not dealing with it by myself, has been helpful for, according to our international students population. They feel like it's helpful knowing that, hey, there is a group that I can go to. I feel safe and comfortable to share, and I feel like people understand my struggles. And also, this is what the students actually shared with me, is they started having this like a study group, not like assigned by the professors. Like they all go to this one class, and they will say like, you know, let's become like a study group for this semester. So every week they will schedule a time that they just turn on their, at our university we use Webex, we use Zoom, and they just turn it on, and then they don't necessarily talk to each other. They may, you know, occasionally chat, but they kind of like just turn it on and see each other like studying. Although they said, you know, we don't necessarily like talk a lot about that, but they do feel like that's a way to help them feel that I'm still like, you know, connect with my peers, and I'm studying. So they told me that there are so many different type of like a kind of like a chat room, like video chat room online now. For students, if they're interested, they could open one and them and their friends could do it together.
This is a great idea. This online chat rooms and perhaps would have different topics and depending on what your topic would be and where you're studying, and perhaps students can just tune in and join them. Yeah, this is a great idea. Okay. Okay, so is anything else before we move on? Any other suggestions, other comments about this topic, about forming online sort of this sense of community and togetherness for international students during remote learning?
I think recognizing that social needs are as important as your physical needs, emotional needs, your need for sleep, your need for nutrition. There's tremendous research around how social support can be a really helpful buffer against stress, and that we are, wired for social connection. So some of us might, feel that deprivation of face-to-face contact or in-person meetings more than others. And some of us might adapt better to virtual meetings than others. And so what I oftentimes also find some resonance in the students that I work with is having a small but solid or consistent group of people, whether that's faculty, whether that's your personal relationships, family relationships, and having a steady social support and staying in connection with them, whether that is doing weekly, just 10-15 minute phone calls. Doesn't have to be an hour, but if it is frequent and if it is short, it does have an impact than that 1.5 hour catch-up phone call that you might have on a monthly basis, or a Zoom call that you might have. So making it regular part of your day or of your week is another recommendation that I oftentimes offer to students as well.
That sounds great, Shaznit. Yeah, I think that also students, I would encourage you guys to reach out to people in your network, reach out to your friends, reach out to your family members. Don't be shy, because you might think that maybe your family or maybe other your peers are maybe busy and with a lot of things on their schedule, but actually they may actually wanting to connect just like you. And so you can be the first person to reach out to them, and they may actually feel very grateful for this outreach from you. Okay, so actually one of our final questions, how can school professionals best encourage their international students to engage in activities that are healthier for their overall well-being? Many students are Zooming for their classes, and actually after the classes, they may be playing video games for their relaxation. I think we can all resonate with this. But we as professionals, I think perhaps we have certain determination in certain activities would be probably healthier and more adaptive for students than others. So what would be some of your suggestions, panelists?
Yeah, actually, I do want to share with you all. I know there are lots of probably professors or staff from the universities. Our university, University of Connecticut, we're doing this things we started like a event called Jonathan's Challenge. So Jonathan basically is a husky dog. It's a mascot of our university. This challenge is all school. So students can accumulate points through like engaging in different types of self-care activities. Those activities could be your personal activities. You take a picture of you like running outside or like jogging, or you join like some of the activities that hosted by the universities, even like different department. So once every day you can upload the picture, basically show that I'm engaged in some self-care like activities, and then you accumulate points, and all those points can you can claim after you accumulate to a certain point. Those points can be used to change for like gift card to Starbucks, some gears of the universities. So it become like intensive incentives for students to keep doing different like self-care activities. I was thinking that, of course, not every university probably gonna do something like that, but I'm thinking like for a professor, you know, for a class, maybe it can be like one of the project that you've been doing throughout the semester. Like every class, like students can show you a picture or like share with the classroom about like what one self-care activities I've been doing in the past week or like today. And then maybe the students can get, I don't know, extra points or some like, you know, gift card Starbucks or something, just like what our university did, and to become something that motivate them to engage in more in those like healthier like habits or like self-care activities.
And hopefully these behavior will stick with students and it can become part of their daily or regular practice.
Yeah, that's our hope too.
I'm so glad to see that your school that you're working with is coming up with such a very creative sort of programming to engage students.
Yeah, so all the departments are included. So for each department at university, if we do have events that open to all the students, it relate to mental health or like self-care, you can put it in the like events calendar. It will be part of the Jonathan's Challenge.
Great. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes left before we close our discussion. So I would like to invite people from our audience. If you have any questions you would like to raise and want our panelists to share their thoughts and feedback, please, this is a great time for you to raise your question, and you feel free to unmute yourself, and based on our discussions or maybe even questions that we don't necessarily get to have time to address so far, please feel free to raise them.
There's one question came to my attention from Nellie, and she's actually curious about what is your suggestion, like kind of what would be helpful as a professional when you actually like having a student in the class, like be adjusting to the virtual platform, and how can you actually kind of address the kind of the nuance of international students in your class, or even like when you're actually working with the community and you notice there's international students maybe having concern about language barriers or cultural barriers, like how would you address it in the virtual platform?
This is a great question.
May I add a little bit to that?
Yeah, sure.
I was thinking, you know, when we're in person, we can learn so much through the language barrier from visual and social cues and reading the room. And especially, I think as Asian Americans, that's especially helpful to feel kind of what's going on in the room. And I'm wondering what we can do both as you know, faculty members and supervisors, as well as students to overcome Zoom. You know, most students are on tiny little laptop monitors, and they're also doing, you know, they're learning counseling skills, but they're also doing telehealth at the, you know, for practicum. And I wonder what we can do to help make sure that there isn't that gap in forming connections and, you know, learning the counseling skills.
I'm sort of just thinking out loud here in response to the question. So I teach a diagnosis class where we do role plays every week. And so I know role plays can be kind of a hit or miss in terms of how much students actually enjoy it. And I was also nervous how this was going to go on Zoom. But using breakout rooms and having the same group every week has been, I think, really helpful. And so usually in the role plays, I dedicate a whole hour to role plays where each person can take turns being the therapist. And my TA and I jump from group to group to observe and give feedback. And so I think that it's actually been working well because it's the same group every week, so they build rapport, and so they are able to then read each other in the room, Zoom room, even because of the continuity. And then my TA and I also get to know them pretty well, and we're able to give pretty individualized feedback that way. But with each of them kind of practicing being the therapist every week, like rotating, I think that they learn to observe from each other in that small group setting. So, and then usually they keep their mics on the whole time, and so they can also hear even sort of nonverbal cues like or grunts or whatnots, right, from like the client the person in the client role or whatnot. So so that's the thing that comes to mind for me. Having like, I think there's, with the Zoom connection, it requires a little bit more intentionality in building community and rapport. And so the consistency with the rapport within a small group setting, I think is what I have found to be helpful.
And just adding on that from the student perspective, I feel like I feel comfortable in small group settings. And for one of my classes, we have had breakout rooms where we're just 4 of us. And when we talk to each other, it gives me like a sense of support, like they're actually hearing me out and not just, dismissing what I'm saying, or it's not being overheard. But I think that small group space where you can actually talk about your feelings in a classroom setting, and it's a class where you have to talk about emotions, your culture a lot. So I think it really gives me a sense of space and that safe space feeling, which I wouldn't really get in a bigger classroom or in front of the whole class.
I think going off of what both of you said, there's like a couple of classes where when, especially for clinical or counseling classes where we've had supervision, something that's been helpful is if we've had to basically conduct a therapy session in front of the entire class, it's when everybody else kind of switches off their video and their microphone, and then like our professor will tell us to keep everything on the speaker view. So that way it almost seems like an intimate setting, and that really helps as well in building rapport.
I guess I just want to acknowledge I'm not in faculty as a training program. However, from a practitioner's perspective, I find it helpful to normalize for myself as well as for my supervisee that it is a different environment when you are doing clinical practice virtually. And I really do miss the body, like the full body. I really do miss having another nervous system literally in the room. Of course, initially I felt like, wow, working from home, that's fantastic, but it's been close to a year and a part of me wants to, go back on site. And so just it's helped me to normalize that I'm not the same practitioner. And in some training programs that I am going through, I know that it's also the information and the skills are not for me sticking in the same way as if I were, learning in person. So that normalization really helps me to calm down my nervous system, to not feel frazzled or to not feel stressed that it's not, sticking with me, or it's not, I'm not, being present as best as I can. So that's the piece that I just find really helpful to communicate, that this is different, you will feel different, you will show up differently, and that's okay.
Natalie, did these answers respond to your questions?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. I think those are important things to remember, that this is unique times, and that maybe to help my students also to understand that it's not because they're international students, it's because we're on Zoom. And that's real, that, you know, missing the connection is a very real thing that is going on. So I really appreciate that. And thinking about consistent small groups, I think is really helpful as well. And it didn't dawn on me, but the importance of keeping our mics on, and that I'm really missing the validation of the you know, the ahas and because we're so polite to turn off our mics, but also we turn off our camera because we don't want to eat on screen. We don't want to hear, you know, there's all these things that we're doing, but really, I think those have always been helpful to me to see the nods, even as the person teaching, you know, to see like, oh, okay, this doesn't make sense. I can see it in your eyes. Let me try again. So even on my end, I feel like I'm missing that, and I imagine it must be much more difficult too to not be able to read whether I'm speaking too loudly or too fast, for someone who also has to deal with you know, English as not their primary language. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's great. So we have about 5 minutes left. I guess we can perhaps take one more questions from the audience. And I wonder if there's any students from the audience or perhaps school professionals, if you have any questions that we haven't been able to have a chance to address. And this is a good opportunity to share your question with us. So just so you know that we are recording this webinar, and so after our webinar in the next few days, we will be compiling a list of resources to support remote learning, as well as a recording of this webinar. And so feel free to share with your peers who are also international students, or perhaps school professionals you work with. Okay, so I'm wondering is anyone who wanted to speak just now? Okay, so I'm wondering, since we are closing our discussion, and perhaps we can go around and for all of our panelists, perhaps to share just one final feedback or advice or suggestions to our international students community, as well as a school professional, if you would like to share just any final suggestion.
I just want to share a thought for the international students, and it's more of an encouragement that international students, I think, oftentimes, like I mentioned earlier, often have this question of belongingness, but also to remember that international students come with a lot of strengths. I know that for me, in my own experience, you know, even in job interviews and stuff like that, when I share that I came as an international student by myself, you know, when I was 18, and, you know, a lot of people say, wow, that's amazing. That's a lot of resilience that you're able to do that. And, you know, leaving your family behind and starting out in a whole new country. And so to remember that you come with a lot of strengths. And especially right now in the midst of COVID, there are a lot of challenges. And for the things that you are overcoming, the things that you are coping with might seem like they're just normal things to you, might just seem like, oh, this is nothing. But pay attention to them. Pay attention to the things, the small victories that you have on how you're managing challenges right now. That they might even become stories one day in your job interviews. Might even, you know, be stories in which you encourage your supervisees one day or encourage your students one day. So you already come with a lot of strengths, and then especially right now with all the challenging things that come with COVID, you're also you know, exhibiting a lot of strengths, and I hope that you take note of them and that you remember them.
That's very great suggestion. I think that we come with this sort of power of being different. Sometimes the difference may get highlighted a lot during our journey as an international student, but there is a lot of power, there's a lot of strength that comes with the difference as well. Yeah, so thank you, Carissa, for pointing this out and remind our international students to not overlook our strength.
I'll really quickly say, listen to your body and reach out.
Listen to your body and reach out. That's great advice.
Well, this is something I heard today from like an international student I work with is love yourself. Basically what she said is, I love myself too much. I said, that's great.
Yeah, we all need to love ourselves, especially during this time. And with that, and I think we can all connect with a lot of others through our self-love and compassion. Yeah.
I think or something I'm taking from the session is like having compassion for yourself and having compassion for the parts which are still growing, and just giving it some time for us to, heal from this pandemic, but also from the daily stresses we all are facing.
Shreya, Sunny?
I think something that's also come out through this is just reiterating that you're not alone. Like, we might be scattered, but we're there and people can always reach out.
Yes, yeah, very important message. You are not alone and we are not alone. Even though we are tuning in from our own space and not physically with each other, but we are connected today on this topic of remote learning support, but know that listen to your body and reach out as well when you feel the need. And Sunny, our co-host.
Sure. I would agree, like every one of you actually saying that, like, love yourself and also remember the strengths and remember the time that you feel like spark joy. Like, I mean, like the experience, like being an international students, there are a lot of moments that actually spark a lot of joy being an international students because our experience are unique, and sharing that story, sharing your experience with people around you actually embrace your identity and also being more powerful. To really kind of bring the story up front and just to share. So yeah, I would just say that, like, embrace your identity wherever you go, whatever time that you're in. So yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So I want to thank all of our great panelists and also my co-host and for your time and also valuable insight and suggestions. I think that we provided a great platform for our international student community as well as school professionals who really want to support our international student community. And so I will be following up with registrants and people who don't necessarily get to join us today with an email with resources as well as the recording of the webinar. And feel free to reach out to me as well, and also Dr. Sunny Ho, if you would like, if you have any questions that don't get addressed necessarily in this webinar. And it's my pleasure to be with you all, and hopefully this would be serving you in a very meaningful way this coming semester. And take good care, everyone. Okay, bye-bye. Take good care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.